Our next speaker is one of the newest members of the Range Cattle Research and Education Center family, Dr. Sarah Lancaster. She is going to give an update on and a review of Kogan grass management, one of our favorite topics.
Can everyone hear me okay? Thanks, Bridget. Can everyone see me okay, or do I need to get behind the podium? Are we good? All right. So, maybe we're good. All right, before I get started this morning, I wanted to give just a short introduction about myself. This is my first visit at the Range Cattle Research and Extension Center here in Ona, a research and education center. And I arrived here from... Forget it. Wait. Forget that. I'm a little more comfortable not behind the podium, but we'll do it this way. Yep, just too much feedback. So I came here from Oklahoma, arrived in April. My husband Philip, who you'll hear from later, and my son Levi, who's getting ready to turn 1. We've been here for about 6 months now, and we appreciate the welcome that we have received here in South Florida, and are looking forward to getting to know some more folks and doing some good work for you. So as I mentioned, I haven't been here very long, but it didn't take me very long to realize that one problem in a weed perspective that a lot of people face is Kogan grass. I mean, it seemed like every place I was going, I was hearing about problems with Kogan grass. So I thought it might be a good idea just to give a little refresher on what we know about Kogan grass, and then provide you guys with a little bit of an update about some of the research that is ongoing and that is being proposed. Will this work better? All right, thank you. So I wasn't the only person on the planet who quickly figured out that Kogan grass is a problem. It was introduced into Florida in the 1930s, 1940s, and the scientists were looking at it as a forage or for soil stabilization. Okay, it did a pretty good job of soil stabilization, but they quickly figured out that the potential problems as a weed far exceeded any benefits for soil stabilization and for forage production. Okay, so we quickly went from trying to make this plant adapted to Florida to trying to get rid of it. It has spread rapidly since it was first introduced. We'll talk a little bit about some of the characteristics that help it spread later on. But given the extent of its spread, I'm not asking for any personal confessions, but how many of you guys have seen pastures or natural areas that are infested with Kogan grass? Okay, that's pretty much what I thought was going to happen. So, here's a chance for you guys to wake up and give me some feedback this morning. I want to know the different types of places you guys have seen Kogan grass. Okay, we're gonna work through, I'm gonna put up a little table here on the whiteboard with different types of environments, okay? And we're going to have 3 categories. I want to know, I call my categories arrives, I'll just put an A, survives, and thrives. I liked the rhyming, I thought it was good. Okay. So, first environment, tropical. Does Kogan grass arrive? So does it just kind of germinate or emerge and then not establish? Does it survive? So can it get established but it doesn't spread very rapidly? Or does it thrive? Does it grow like crazy and really expand its what'd I hear? Thrives. See, you guys have got this. How about subtropical? How about temperate climates? Oh, this is one we don't have much experience with. Survives. How about dry soils? dry environments? It thrives. How about moist soils? How about flooded soils? And here's some thrives. Yeah, I put survives. How about sunny areas? Thrives. How about shaded areas? Shade? Thrives? Okay, I'll give you some of the we're running out of room, so I'll give you some of the other examples of areas that it thrives in, because you guys are seeing the pattern here, right? It can grow very well in a very wide range of environments. So it grows well in areas with frequent fire. It's actually adapted to fire. One of the problems that a Kogan grass infestation can create is that it can change the cycle of fires on the land. So it makes them hotter, and then native plants can't withstand those hotter fires as well. So it alters the environment to be better for its own growth. It can grow in sandy soils, clayey soils, acidic soils, high soil organic matter, low soil organic matter, and one of the ones that I thought was kind of interesting is that it even thrives in areas of phosphorus deficiency. Okay? So the moral of the story here is that Kogan grass can not only become established, but also spread very rapidly and become very pervasive in a wide range of environments. Okay? So we talked about how Kogan grass can change the way fires operate in an ecosystem. Kogan grass does some other things that help to alter the ecosystem. One of those things is that we're pretty sure that it's allelopathic. So allelopathy is a fancy word for a plant that produces chemicals that are harmful to other plants. Okay? And we actually have a high school student who's getting ready to start some small experiments to try to demonstrate that concept a little bit. It's been demonstrated in Mississippi, and we're going to look at it with bahia grass and see if, in fact, the chemicals that are produced by the roots of Kogan grass are harmful to bahia grass. Another thing that allows Kogan grass to spread rapidly is its rhizomes. Okay? We're going to do a little bit of identification review here in just a minute. But these are the rhizomes that this plant produces. Okay? They're very aggressive, they're very sharp and pointy. I've heard it said that they can puncture the roots of other plants and harm the other plants in the environment in that way. Okay? So the next thing I wanted to do is go through some identification. So I've showed you guys these rhizomes. They're usually white on the outside, scaly on the outside and white after you flake those scales off. They are sharp and pointy. These rhizomes here have been broken off when we pulled them out of the soil, but there are a couple on here that still have their points. And if you're interested, you can come check these out after their presentations and see just in fact how sharp they are. They are very sharp. So those are the rhizomes. They're mostly found in the top 6 inches of the soil. Okay, so relatively shallow. If we kind of move up the plant and look at other characteristics, we'll come to the stem. One of the things that makes Kogan grass unique is that there really is no visible stem. These leaves all originate very low to the ground. Okay, so it looks like the leaves just grow right out of the ground. The stem doesn't make itself very visible. Another thing to look at when you look at the stem is down here at the base, there are some hairs where those leaves start to branch off from the stem. Okay, there's some long kind of fuzzy hairs down there. Okay, so that's another good identifying characteristic of Kogan grass. If we move on up, we've got the leaves. Okay, the leaves are usually going to be kind of a lime green color, but that varies from one environment to the next. These two plants were growing about 5 feet from each other. One was very near a ditch and one was upland a little bit, but you can see what just that difference in environment did to the appearance of the leaves of that plant. This one was a little more stressed. It was in that water a little bit more than the other one. Okay. So another thing about the leaves of Kogan grass is that typically this mid vein, so the big prominent white vein that is in the middle of most blades of grass, is offset to one side in Kogan grass, typically. So that's another good characteristic for identifying Kogan grass, okay, is to look for that vein that's offset. Something else about the leaves, they don't really fold over like leaves of a lot of other plants, right? They're pretty straight. They stay upright. That's because this plant has a lot of silica in the leaves. Okay, so those leaves are pretty rigid. That characteristic of having a lot of silica is one of the reasons why Kogan grass isn't such a good forage once it gets mature. Okay? So after we go through the leaves, next we're going to get to the inflorescence. My plants here today aren't flowering. One of the things that's a little bit unique about Kogan grass is that it does flower for a long period of time. I've seen plants flowering on the roadsides today. And when it does flower, it's a white, fluffy cylinder. Okay, so those seeds all have little hairs on them, and those hairs help that plant disperse in the wind. Okay, and that's an important part of tracking Kogan grass infestations. Some research suggests that those hairs and the ability of those seeds to fly in the wind has helped that plant spread over large geographical areas. Okay, so management. In general, the first thing and probably most important thing to remember about Kogan grass management is that it just takes patience and persistence. Okay, it's a little bit of a test of wills. Okay, that plant is going to put a lot of energy into those rhizomes. That's where it's going to regrow from after a fire, and that's its bank. Okay. That's good for the plant, that's bad for us, because basically to defeat this plant, you have to kill those rhizomes over time, okay? We haven't found any herbicides that are a quick fix, that one shot will take care of this plant, but we are looking at some, okay? Right now, the standard recommended practice is to use either imazapyr or glyphosate. Those are the two herbicide names. And again, just repeated applications is something that's important. We are currently evaluating new and alternative herbicides for Kogan grass. One of them is aminocyclopyrrolachlor. It's a new product that's expected out here in 2014, and there's some evidence that it does reduce seed production, but we're not sure that it's going to be the perfect answer by itself either. Okay. We're also working at gathering information about the genetics of different Kogan grass populations, because there's been some reports that control varies a lot from one environment to the other. So the question there then is that because of differences in the environment? Is it because of the applicator? Is it because of differences in the plant? Are we seeing genetic differences in some of these Kogan grass populations that might require different management approaches for different areas? Okay. So to kind of summarize and wrap up, Kogan grass management is a problem that we recognize, and we're continuing to conduct research to find better ways. There are some management options available. They all require patience and they require persistence. And then I'll open it up for questions if you guys have any questions. If you do, there are some young ladies in the back who have some microphones for us. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not very knowledgeable about anything, but can any animals eat this?
It doesn't make very good forage. Those leaves get very tough. The chemical makeup of those leaves make it so that it's not a very good forage. They get sharp on the edges. You can come feel how rough the edges are. It's not something that many critters are going to want to eat.
In the spring, cattle will eat it real good for the first 2 or 3 months. We've got a lot of it on reclaimed mine land that is 90% smut grass, and that's the only time they graze it if you burn it in the spring, and then they'll usually graze it. But after it gets a little more mature than those, the cattle just quit it.
Yes, sir. That's what I've been told. What I've heard is that if you burn, then that new growth, that young growth is somewhat palatable. But once it gets mature, it's not a very good feed source. Have you looked at protein content, if it's palatable? I'm trying to remember. I don't think Brent's shaking his head yes. Can you save me on that one, Brent? So similar to Bahia after a burn. Yes, sir.
Have you seen any problem with glyphosate tolerance in it?
Well, that's kind of one of the questions to look at with this whole environment genetics study is this plant developing tolerance? Because you're setting yourself up for resistance by only having 2 herbicides that you're using repeatedly. Plus, those 2 herbicides, the way they work, they're prone to developing resistance. So it's definitely a potential concern.
I have a question. One of the biggest problems I see with the Kogan grass is the invasion in our native habitats, especially in palmetto flatwoods. Your description of it being able to kill it, if it gets into palmettos, it will actually, the palmettos will die out underneath it. I didn't know if it was shading or the chemical effect. Are we looking at any chemicals that can be used in a native environment? Dr. Arthington talked about a little bit the questions of putting more land back into native habitat, but right now this is a major threat to our native woods.
Yes, sir. You hit on a problem. The 2 chemicals that are available are not selective. So, well, generally not selective. So you're going to have bare ground issues. There has been some work done in Gainesville. A student looked at how do native plants respond after you control the Kogan grass. And that's still an area that needs some more question, because I think one of the things you're going to have to look at is how do you revegetate those areas with native plants, because the Kogan grass completely changes that ecosystem, that habitat. Train the cows. Yes, ma'am.
Would it be possible to take Kogan grass, like a large area, and contain it with disking and spraying and keeping it in one area? Would it eventually kill itself out?
So Kogan grass, one area that we didn't put on the board is tilled areas. Kogan grass, you don't see it very often in tilled fields.
Would it eventually, if you didn't let it spread, would it kill itself out if you kept it growing in one area?
I don't think so. And the reason I say that is purely anecdotal, and that is that I've seen plants that are just completely pot bound and the roots are growing around and around themselves, and it's still growing great. I don't know what it's a perennial plant, so I'm not sure. That's something I'll have to look into some more though. Thanks. Yes, sir. So it doesn't so the question was, if you till it, does that kill it? It does not tolerate tillage well because of disturbing those rhizomes so frequently. The problem with tillage, or one of the drawbacks of tillage, is that you really have to be careful with sanitizing your equipment, cleaning your equipment, making sure that you're not taking Kogan grass from field A to field B after you've disked field A and then you're going to field B where cogongrass doesn't exist.
Is there any research into biocontrols for cogongrass, or is it strictly mechanical and chemical management?
There's some, but there's no promising leads, right? Would that be the way to answer that, Brent? There is some, but there's nothing that seems like it's going to be a good answer. One more in the back, Cindy.
Has there been any other use for it? Like you were saying that it has a lot of silica in the blades. Has anybody tried to use the blades for anything other than foliage, like, melting it down?
The only other thing I know is that in like Asia, they use it for thatching roofs some. I've read that,
I mean,
but
the
I don't think that's going to happen here.
So if it's used, all that silicone going to waste.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Have the bio-nitrogen plant, have those folks looked at it?
I don't know. I can't answer that one. I don't know. And I don't know if anybody's looked at it like for biomass production for ethanol. I don't know.
Biomass is in it.
Urea? I don't think so.
Have you been inaugurated yet? Said you're from Oklahoma. I just wondered if you'd had a chance to be inaugurated yet.
I guess not.
We have a pet alligator out there that has to be wrestled.
Oh, is that my job later? Well, I'll let Philip do that first, and then I'll go. I think it's time to move on. Thank you, guys. Oh, one more? We've got some time. One more?
I just had a question about its reproduction. Is it primarily rhizomal, or is it mostly, well, how viable are the seeds?
The seed are viable, and they are responsible for long-distance transport. A while back there was some thought that the seed viability was pretty low, and that's a true story based on research, but it produces a lot of seed, and so, low viability, a low percentage of a large number can still be a problem. But when you're talking about local spread, that's primarily rhizomes.
Were the goats control it at all?
Will goats control it? I have not seen or read anything about goats and Kogan grass. I don't know. Goats aren't very picky though, so maybe that's... All right. Thank you guys.